themselves, turn in on themselves, and kill each other. And that's approximately what happened.
The organization was coming apart through a variety of means, people deciding to turn themselves in, a great deal of criticism of us, of me, for the failures and weaknesses in our leadership.
People knew each other's whereabouts on a need-to-know basis. And toward the end, that became more and more restricted because everybody got more and more freaked out, paranoid, I would say, to some extent. And so I had no way. I wasn't living in a collective. I was living on my own. And what I had as a connection was meeting to meeting. We're going to meet at such and such a place at such and such a time. I raised the criticisms in a particularly sharp way at a meeting with some people in leadership, and they didn't show up for the next meeting, and then I didn't have any way to get in touch with them anymore. So it was over for me.
October 19th, 1977. Dear Dad, hello from the other side of the shadows. I don't mean to shock you, but I've been contemplating writing to you for a long time. First, the good news, which is you have a second grandson. He had a good birth, no drugs, no problems, and his mom is okay too. I've been working when I can, which is not full-time and not nearly enough to support us. Not only do I lack skills and qualifications, I also lack the references and work record fitting my age, all of which become more important with this extreme unemployment. Right now, it's hard to get a job pushing a broom if you can't prove you've been doing it for 10 years. Often I wake up and find it completely inexplicable how and why I am where I am today and disconnected from my family. As I know you won't be out here for a while, I'm finding an address where you can write me directly. Please send me your advice or reflections on what I should do.
Mark Rudd, the fugitive radical, turned himself in today to authorities in New York City after years of hiding. He was a leader of the Weather Underground back in the 60s, but he's 30 years old now, and the world has changed.
Today, Rudd came out of hiding and walked into the office of the District Attorney of New York County to give himself up.
Rudd didn't say why he gave himself up, but his father said this. He's 30 years old. You get to be too old to be a revolutionary. You have to start something else.
Even though the organization had ended and we really didn't have a strategic and political reason for staying underground, I found the idea of turning myself in revolting. And I had a baby. We had a new baby, and we immersed ourselves in a whole new life with parents and children. And moved to the East Coast and sort of started over. And Zaid was getting old enough so that it was obviously becoming complicated to never have anybody know where we lived and never have anybody come over to our house. So I came to that decision in the summer of '80, finally. And once I made the decision, it was just a matter of holding my nose and going through with the surrender.
Bernardine Dohrn, the former anti-war leader and student radical, surrendered today in Chicago.
Rebellion is inevitable and continuous. Resistance by every means necessary is happening and will continue to happen within the United States as well as around the world. And I remain committed to the struggle ahead.
By the end of the 70s, almost all of the members of the Weather Underground had turned themselves in. Few ended up going to prison. Ironically, the government was forced to drop most of the charges against them when it became clear how much the FBI had broken the law in pursuing the group. As the 70s drew to a close, America seemed to be falling apart. Watergate, Vietnam, and recession had sapped the country's confidence. Most Americans seemed to want to put the trauma of the previous decade behind them.
I've walked by here a lot in the last 30 years. Nice little tree-lined street, pretty buildings. And never really gets much easier. If you think that you have the moral high ground, that's a very dangerous position, and you can do some really dreadful things. You see it with terrorists these days, you know, who think that, well, maybe Allah's on their side or history's on their side or whatever. They can do some things that are just completely unconscionable. They can blow up the World Trade Center, you know, they can just do horrible, horrible things. The Oklahoma City bombing. I'm sure that guy felt that he was on the side of right. And, you know, there may be a handful of people who agreed with him, so that is a dangerous ethical position that we fell into. That was caused, I think, a lot by the Vietnam War. I think that the Vietnam War made us all a little crazy. It's the only way I can explain it.
When I was in prison, I'd been in prison for about 2 years, and I was put in isolation. And I wrote a letter to my father, and I said, either I'm really a great optimist and have just oceans of hope and joy, or I'm really stupid and too dumb to know what's happening to me. And I still feel that sometimes because most of the movement that was committed to and really thought a revolution was going to happen in the late 60s, early 70s, has fallen by the wayside and said, oh, it's going to be eons and, you know, it's not going to happen, whatever. Not most, but a lot of people. I still have hope. I don't think we're going to have a revolution in 5 years like I did in 1970, but I definitely think that people never stop struggling and never stop waiting for the moment when they can change the things that make their lives unlivable.
I would do it again. I'd like to do it better, differently, smarter, but in a revolutionary context, if I didn't have my old parents and my young kid, I would certainly do it again. I would certainly want to be part of an emerging revolution again. It was a precious, precious opportunity. And I think we came close. I mean, I think the world came close to seeing those major changes, and I think that that makes a difference in terms of the ability of movements for change to emerge in the future. The fact that there's a history of resistance There's a history of white people's participation in resistance, I think makes a difference to the ability of that kind of resistance to emerge again.
Do you think it will?
I think it already is.
Why have you been so reluctant to talk about your own experiences?
My mixed feelings. My feelings of guilt and shame. These are things that I am not proud of. And I find it hard to speak publicly about them, you know, and to tease out what was right from what was wrong. I think that part of the Weatherman phenomenon that was right was our understanding of what the position of the United States is in the world. It was this knowledge that we just couldn't handle. It was too big. We didn't know what to do. In a way, I still don't know what to do with this knowledge. I don't know what needs to be done now. And it's still eating away at me, just as it did 30 years ago.